Tonight, we welcome Drea Bowen, and her topic is It's Our Nature, One Heart Wild Education Sanctuary. In an era marked by a pandemic, global upheaval, social media saturation, and economic turbulence, our intrinsic bond with nature is a potent balm for the body and soul. Amidst the chaos, our connection to animals and the natural world remains a steadfast source of solace and renewal. So join us as we explore It's Our Nature, a journey into the science and soul of the profound healing potential inherent in our relationship with the natural world. Excuse me. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming. It's been a long time since I've been out doing a talk, so I might be a little rusty. We'll see how it goes, but I'm excited to be sharing some of the things that I feel most passionate about in life. This is our logo. I'll talk a little bit about Dr. Gay Bradshaw tonight and her philosophy about sanctuary and our connection to other animals and just some of the science that we have learned over the course of my career. It's changed a lot in terms of how we understand ourselves and how we understand other animals and how we understand that we're more the same than different. So One Heart Wild started as a professional co-op, just a group of women that got together and started providing animal-assisted services, and that was in 2010. And by 2015, we were a nonprofit, more organized, and kind of had a better vision about where we were going. We started out really focused on offering animals or equine assisted therapy, really focused more on horses. That was a better known intervention at the time than the more broader scope that we are now today as an animal assisted and equine assisted therapy organization. It was kind of a happy accident. We didn't intend to extend beyond working with horses and people, but many of the clients that came out to work with us, a lot of them children, and also some adults, had either some trauma with horses at some point in their life, and horses were a big challenge for them. And other people were just, especially kids, were just drawn to some of the smaller animals that we had at the sanctuary. So that really started us thinking about how does this work transfer. There was some good information about what was happening between horses and people, but how does that transfer if we're working with a chicken or if we're working with a cow or if we're working with sheep? So we've been evolving as an organization since 2015 and really been on the cutting edge of developing a way of working therapeutically with all kinds of animals that are at our sanctuary. And these are just some of the animals that we live. A lot of them have passed over time. I live on the sanctuary. It's 10 acres. We have about 72 animals there and representing 12 different species. And we have 4 animal care staff that work part-time. And we have, where are we at right now? I think we're at 5 mental health therapists that work part-time to full-time, depending on what else they do in the world besides work at One Heart Wild. And we've really expanded in how we do the work and how we take it out of the world. We are also in the schools quite a bit. So we do community-based mental health with the schools, and we really try and get as many kids as we can to the sanctuary because that's where the magic happens. It's nice to be where we have access to kids. The level of trauma and anxiety, depression, higher than ever after COVID, especially. I think kids that were kind of holding it together before COVID happened, the wheels really kind of came off the bus as they navigated through COVID. So it's nice to be in the schools where we have access to kids, and it's even better if we can get them out to the sanctuary to do social and emotional workshops or even have that extend on to be a more therapeutic relationship long-term. So some of the decisions that we made early on were, again, kind of accidental. When we were setting up the organization, the lawyer that we were working with really recommended that we not be a rescue, that we not take animals in from the public, and then we figure out some way to kind of maintain or or put some barriers around the animals that we would take in as we grew. And what we ended up deciding on was that animals would come to us. We would hold a different place in the community. We would be a resource for veterinarians that were looking for a referral for animals that they ran across. Either owners can't afford the care, or perhaps the owner has passed away or is being moved into senior care, or some tragedies happened and the animals are no longer able to be cared for. Or we take animals in from a rescue organization or another sanctuary. And we're really mostly taking animals in that are senior and have higher needs, or have maybe behavioral issues because of trauma. They would be difficult for a typical person to adopt because of the nature of the needs of the animals. So those are the animals that come to us. And that was really, as I look back on it now, it wasn't anything that I would have even known to think about or ask about, but through conversation and putting those perimeters in place, it feels really important that we hold that space, that we can have a veterinarian call and transfer a sheep to us, or the Humane Society has transferred some animals to us that had high medical needs. And that has created, as we've gotten further down the road in what we do, what I realized about 3 or 4 years in is what we did was create a stable social environment for the animals. And that is a game changer in terms of the work that we do. So rather than, a typical horse organization or a foster or rescue organization, animals are coming and going all the time. And there's disruption in that, there's chaos in that, and there's trauma in that. So it's, again, kind of a happy accident that we set things up the way that we did. Animals come, they spend their lives with us. We don't adopt them out. And I would say that's not 100%. If there was just a really unique case where an animal would be better served someplace else, then we might make a different decision. But we do make the decision to commit to those animals for life when they come. I get the question a lot from people if the animals that we work with are specially trained, and they are not. So we allow every animal as much autonomy as we possibly can. They get to choose who they want to live next to. They can choose whether or not they want to be involved in a session or not. They can start being involved and decide, I don't like it, I want out, and they can leave. And I think that's really important, especially for the population that we're working with when we're thinking about working therapeutically. I'm going to follow up on this as we go, but scientifically, when we look at what happens when we're in a stable social environment, whether it's us or whether it's the animals that we work with, or whether it's the container that we provide for the people that we work with, our genes express differently based on the experience that we have. And healthy social experiences, stable social experiences have a direct impact on our physiology. And it's really been fascinating in my career to see over the last decade how much research is coming out to support just how important our relationship is with animals, and how important our relationship is with nature, and why that is. And it's all about our physiology and how humans came to be. Early on, we designed a program called Animals and Empathy, and this program was a 6-week program. We went into elementary schools, and every time we went in, we read a book that was about a bond, a human-animal bond with an animal. So we had one we read on chickens, guinea pigs, of course, dogs and cats, and I think a horse. And then we brought in information about the animals at the sanctuary, and we told the story to the children about how the animals ended up there. So we have animals that have trauma. We have animals that have separation anxiety. We have animals that have suffered a lot of losses. We have animals that have had a lot of medical issues and continue to have invasive medical needs in order to continue moving forward. We have animals that have difficulty making friends because of their behavior. And again, we really didn't think about how this was going to play out. We trial things. We put a trial together. We go out and we see how it goes. And the kids were relating to the stories. The kids were saying, "Oh, that happened to me," or I have a difficult time making friends, or I lost my grandpa, or I'm really shy. And so we then said, okay, now the field trip is going to be, you get to write a letter to the animal that you resonate with. Write a letter, or you can draw a piece of artwork. And when you come out for the work for your field trip, you get to go to the animal that you've learned about and read your story to them. And, I think, I don't know who gets the most out of our experiences here, whether it's the animals, whether it's the kids, whether it's those of us witnessing it, but it's profound to have really, and a privilege to hear the stories the kids would share with the animals based on their own life experiences and having something in common with the animals that they had learned about. I'm going to refer to lots of authors and different researchers throughout the presentation. Most of it's related to just how important connection is to us, and I'm going to always extend that quote or idea if it's not directly related to research on the human animal bond. That like this quote, for instance, what we do inside relationship matters more than any other aspect of human life. That's also true for animals, for social animals and birds. So again, just bringing back the idea that we're more the same than different. And, I think a lot of us, especially if we love animals, we know that we have a sense about it, we have a feeling about it, but more and more we're proving that. And when I first started in this industry, my work was pretty woo-woo, and people, yeah, right, that's cute, that's fun. But I'm a bit nerdy when it comes to this stuff, and I love being able to have presentations and conversations now with the science that backs up what we knew in our heart was happening. Now we know that it is actually happening. So just looking at these pictures, every social mammal in this picture has the same kind of attachment, love, nurture, protection that we do. We're not alone. We're not unique. We're not different. We are more the same than different. So Heart Math Institute started out doing some basic research on the electromagnetic heart, the field around our heart. And again, that was kind of a woo-woo out there idea at first, but they have consistently year after year after year done more and more research, and fascinating. Their website is amazing. Their work is amazing. If it's something that interests you, I highly recommend looking them up. But what they discovered early on is the heart electromagnetic field is 5,000 times stronger than our brain. And that's kind of a contradiction. We used to think, or 20 years ago when I first started doing this work, it was longer than that, but about 20 years ago when we really started thinking about brain versus heart, we all thought that most of the information was going from the command center of the brain down to our body. And as time has gone on, we've learned so much more about how our bodies actually work. We have brain cells in our heart. We have brain cells in our gut. I think as research goes on, we'll find that we have brain cells in other organs and probably big muscle systems as well. So there's a lot of information that's coming from our body up to our brain, and that's being integrated into how we experience the world. And this kind of research helps us understand that. This piece of research was done in Europe. So I don't think Heart Math Institute was involved with this one. I think it was actually researchers that were looking at how humans and animals impact each other. And they were they wondered if they could prove that my emotional state could impact an animal's emotional state. So they sought out expert horse handlers and brought a horse that they were very familiar with into this research, so that the handler wasn't having to deal with a horse that they didn't know. That wasn't going to influence their emotional response to this exercise. So expert handler with a horse that they were familiar with. They had heart monitors on each one. They're in a big arena, and if you've seen dressage arenas, They have letters along this on the side walls. And the rule was, or the process was, this pair would start at A and they would walk to F, and at D, an umbrella would open. So the human knew this was going to be the path, A to F, at D, the umbrella would open. They took a heart rate reading before they started, and they were pretty regulated cohesively together. And as the pair approached D, you know what happened inside the human. The human's brain is saying, oh my God, what's going to happen when that umbrella opens up in front of my horse? That is activating that human's nervous system. And that was registering with the horse in every single pair. So that was really fascinating. That was done probably in 2010 or 11, and early on in the research, and that was really fascinating for those of us in doing this work, because you can feel it when you work with a lot of animals. You know that that's happening, but again, it's pretty out there if you don't have some science to back it up. So 2012 was a really exciting year for me, as a person doing this work for a long time and really moving into understanding more about how we are more the same than different and why. Jaak Panksepp was a really very famous, in my world, very famous affective neuroscientist. He did a lot of research and mapped out in non-human animal brains and human brains what's the same, what emotion circuits we share. And in 2012, neuroscientists, affective neuroscientists from around the world gathered at Cambridge University and pooled their research and started to look at, is there a common theme that we can walk away from with? And the Declaration of Consciousness came from that on July 7th in 2012. And that said that we all share the same substrates in our brain. And there is good hard evidence that shows we share emotion circuits as social, that at that time, social mammals and birds. Now the research is extending to cephalopods and fish. And I mean, there's even some really amazing, different from brain substrates, but there's also some really interesting research coming out on plants as well. So Jaak came up with 7 circuits that we share. And every social brain is going to have these circuits. Seeking, that's our enthusiasm for life. The things that get us up, the things that are unique about us, what we love to do, what motivates us. And when that seeking circuit is damaged, depression is a result of that. Rage is, something that every social mammal experiences for one, at one time or another. And that self-regulation and your self-management skills are really important in managing those big emotions, as humans can do that. And animals, non-human animals, have a different way of managing it, better, of course. But trauma really impacts that. Our fear circuit, care circuit is the big one. So I think that as we go through this presentation, the care circuit is really the thing I'm going to keep coming back to, because that's the thing that we know is so important to our happiness, our wellness, our long-term health. As we look at loneliness right now, the research on loneliness for seniors, for children, families, individuals, loneliness is becoming the one of the biggest threats to our wellness as a human species, which shouldn't be, but it's all connected to that need for connection and positive, healthy social connection. I'm not going to go through these. I think, I touched on that. I think so. Fear, if we think more about what fear is the anxiety system. And when we're exposed to a chronic level of toxic stress, whether it's an animal, we have many animals in our at the sanctuary that have lived through a lot of abuse and neglect, have similar challenges in terms of getting along and trusting and being able to connect until they heal, as people do. So the panic and grief system is important in terms of being allowed to feel the way that you feel about grief. And there's also really a lot of information right now about how we humans process grief. We don't do death very well. And in that, we don't often allow ourselves to grieve or each other to grieve or support each other in it. And it's so individual and different. Um, and it's the same for animals. We've seen, it's so interesting when you look at different species and how they manage grief and the behaviors that you see as a result of it. And I'll talk a little bit more about that and Gabe Bradshaw's research. So Dr. Gabe Bradshaw is another really influential person in the work that I do. She established the concept of transspecies psychology. She is a trained psychologist and ethologist, and really started to see in her research. Her research was mainly in the field. Panksepp's research was mainly in the laboratory. As she's watching animals and understanding them from her she always believed that animals we were more the same than different. So when she saw a behavior or heard a noise that she could connect to something that she understood as a human, she knew she was looking at something that she was relating to as another social mammal. So psychology is that mental emotional piece of who we are. Ethology is how our behaviors come about as a result of those things. And then our neurology is how that processes in our brain. She's been on the front lines of helping us understand and helping bring those three traditions together, especially as how we understand each other and other animals. So she and Panksepp, she didn't like him very much. She didn't like that he was doing laboratory research, that animals suffered as a result of that. But they both were on the same tracks in terms of understanding we're more the same than different, and that matters. They were just going about it from different perspectives. So again, she spent a lot of time in the field watching animals. She spent a lot of time with elephants. She was the first to say she was seeing PTSD in elephants, and has written a book about her research and her experiences in the field and the behaviors that she saw and why that came about. So loss of habitat, poaching, a lot of death and dying and fear and stress from the humans around elephants created, the same kind of mental health challenges that humans have. And she took a lot of flack for that early on. She's probably 20 years older than me, so she's been doing this work for half a century. And at the time when she first started talking about this, especially behaviorists were not impressed with how she was thinking about things. So similar to humans, non-human animals experience complex emotions. And I think that's clear just in terms of how we're looking at research from different aspects. But she took it a step further, and she says they experience chronic stress. They experience attachment wounds. Anything that's dominant or oppressive creates a toxic level of stress, and we're going to see that in behavior and probably longevity, reduction of longevity. So transspecies psychology seeks to prevent and treat trauma in all animals through increased scientific understanding. Again, her approach is very different. As a psychologist, she's saying, I want this information because I want it applied to other animals as well. I don't want it to just matter for humans to get well. I want it to matter for all the animals that we're responsible for, either in our lives or caring for in the wild. So this is just a very simplified way of looking at the brain. This is MacLean's triune brain theory. It doesn't hold scientifically today, but it's a general idea of kind of what we're going to look at as we go forward. We know the neocortex here is responsible for executive function. It's our thinking brain, it's our rational brain. limbic brain is in the midsection of our brain. The amygdala is there, and that's very impacted by as our emotion system. There's some different, we've got some pushback on that as we've gone forward, but it's good enough for today. And then the reptilian brain, that is the brain, that's the part of our brain that manages the automatic things that we need to do to survive, breathing and coughing and that kind of thing. So the limbic system is what we know is the point of effect in terms of working with other animals. It's that connection piece. We are connected to another animal. Our similar brains are resonating. And through that resonation, we're also regulating each other. And if we have those experiences and it's positive, we actually have a limbic revision, and that's kind of the path to healing. So if you look at this picture, you can see that the horse is making a decision. That's a big horse. That horse is not going to leave her head there unless she wants to. You can see the expression on her face is soft and her ears are soft. But if you look at the little guy, there's a lot of tension in that body. There's tension in his face. You can see his hands are wrapped pretty tightly around that muzzle. And I wish that I could see this in a video, because I know what happens in this situation. We see it all the time at the sanctuary. As long as that horse is able to stay in that space and that resonance is there, regulation is going to happen. And you're going to see this little person's whole little nervous system and all of that tightness kind of start to melt. And that is a revision in that limbic system in that moment, which is really fascinating. So we're hardwired for connection, and that connection doesn't have to be between you and me. It can be between me and the horse, or me and the dog, or any other animal that is, we have a close relationship with. The other thing that we've learned through the research, and this is more on the social work side or the psychology side, we know that what's been hurt in relationship has to heal in relationship. So that is another piece that brings the work that we do into light. Talking therapy is great to an extent, but what we can do in relationship with other animals while we're talking is it's like healing on steroids for a lot of people, which is really wonderful. So again, limbic resonance and regulation. We took guinea pigs out to Bainbridge Island High School during finals week, and there's so much stress on the grounds. We had guinea pigs and chickens actually, and kids would come and stop and either sit with a chicken, feed a chicken, or pick up a guinea pig. And this is resonance and regulation, and that's a little tiny animal with a human and having that same experience of regulation, which is calming the nervous system. So the Journal of American Veterinary Medicine Association published this. This came out again probably in 2013, 14. I was so happy to see this, because oftentimes in the veterinary world, and it's changing, but they really hadn't spent a lot of time educating their vets about the human-animal bond and how important that is. And we have to tend to that as much as we have to tend to the animals that they're caring for. And we were talking earlier about social work and understanding the connection that people have to their animals. We have to tend to the animals in order to care for the people. So it goes both ways. So their definition of the human-animal bond is a mutually beneficial and dynamic relationship between people and other animals that is influenced by behaviors that are essential to the health and well-being of both. This includes, but is not limited to, emotional, psychological, and physical interactions of people, other animals, and the environment. So our genes respond to social experiences. I mentioned that early on. This picture of this person, and this was one of our really old goats. He lived till he was 21. That's another thing that's happened as a result of the sanctuary and the choices that we've made. We have animals live longer than any of our vets have ever seen. Mm-hmm. And so it's such an interesting dilemma. We love it, but it's also a challenge to get veterinary care, because the veterinarians just haven't seen it happen. So we're always having to work together, trying to figure out what's the best thing to do in that case, because they don't always know. But anyway, this woman came out. She has had debilitating clinical depression, suicidal I honestly don't know how she kept herself alive. The depression was so bad. She couldn't do talk therapy. So she was recommended to come out, and she developed a bond with Sparky. And it's this, we see these animals make amazing decisions in sessions. And she was very limited, had a lot of disability, physically, had a hard time walking around, but she really wanted to be where he was. So sometimes we would sit and he would just come and find her and put his head on her lap. But oftentimes she wanted to try and walk with him. And he would literally get in front of her and slow her down. And that was her interpretation of what was happening. And that was my interpretation of what was happening. And that bond kept her coming back. And that was something that she could not do in any other form of therapy. During that, those interactions with Sparky, she and I could have conversations that she couldn't have anyplace else. She can't, it's so difficult to have some of those, or even to how do you get to the conversation in a clinical office? In nature, on the sand pile, on the trail, with the goat, with a horse, those conversations come up organically and really open up opportunities for healing that just don't exist outside of that. Okay, I'm going to move on from that. This study, again, that was an exciting early time for research. This came out of WSU. They did a 12-week program with kids that were in grades 5 through 8. It was an equine assisted program. And what that program showed afterwards, which was substantial at the time. So it not only decreased kids' cortisol levels during the time of those 12 weeks and their negative behaviors. They had an increase in self-awareness, because this work is really about paying attention to the somatic information that's coming from your body. So we teach kids and people that are come out how to pay more attention to your body. So that self-awareness is really important, and that leads to self-management skills and a change in behavior. But the other thing that happened was those cortisol levels remained low for 2 weeks or more after. So that's efficacy that is pretty impressive when we're looking at kids who are highly stressed, and the behaviors that get them in so much trouble, and then they get labeled and they get in the system that is kind of a vicious loop. So that was exciting research for all of us. The other thing that they showed in this is that integration, working with animals in a therapeutic way, helps our left and right hemisphere brains integrate. So we can be heavily left brain about life. We want to know what's going to happen. We want to plan. We want to think things through. And we really don't want to spend too much time thinking about how we feel about it. Or we can be the other way. We can be really focused on how things feel and worried about that, and worried about how other people are thinking and feeling, and not really having a good way of thinking about what's reality. When we're doing this work, people have to think about, what's the animal doing? What does that behavior mean? And pay attention to, how do I feel about that? Am I okay? Am I not okay? Is the horse okay? Is the horse not okay? So that really, it's just, again, an organic way of helping people think about, and they don't know that's what they're doing, but it's part of the healing process, is that they're actually integrating both sides of their brain, which is a really good thing in a healing process. Okay. I quote this book. It's an old book at this point. But early on, Lewis et al. Put a lot of information out there that started to help us understand how we seek each other. And it doesn't have to be human to human, how we resonate, how we regulate, and how we have the ability to change neural patterns as a result of those experiences. Gay Bradshaw would take that a step further and say, what happens to us inside relationship matters more than any other aspect of all social animal life. I think we all know where we all have ended up as humans, big brained thinking humans. And we all, every single one of us, have a history that goes back to Native people somewhere in our history, somewhere back. We came from Native people. And Native people instinctually understood that we were all related, that it was important, our tribe was important, animals were important, the environment was important, plants were important for all kinds of reasons. We lived in harmony, and we lost that. And I think I'm seeing humans seek more of that balance again. We're starting to have different conversations, and we're starting to understand, especially when we look at all the things that are happening to our environment. We need a change. We need to get back to where we were, where we're understanding and living and making choices and decisions, acknowledging that we're all connected. So these are some more interesting and important research that came out, and I need to update these because in the last 5 years, research has been on fire. There's organizations that are funding big research projects to better understand what the mechanisms are in human animal therapy and why, and when, what good is happening. And I'm always interested in knowing what good is happening for the animals too. And that's and part of our mission statement. Everything that we do has to be mutually beneficial. I created this organization and Roots Institute as well, because the industry was taking whatever they wanted to from the animals to help the humans. And I think that if people knew that, yeah, they're feeling better, but what happened to the horse in that experience, or what happens to that horse in that experience day after day after day, that horse isn't getting better. That horse is not well. It can't sustain what they're asking of it on a long-term basis. So I knew when I came into this work, I wanted to do something different. I wanted it to be mutually beneficial. I believe that we were more the same than different. And I wanted to make sure that whatever we did had the same opportunity for growth and healing and learning for the animal, non-human animal, as it did for us. And I think we've been successful doing that. And we're very different as a result of that. We work a lot with people with all kinds of challenges and disabilities, people on the spectrum. And this little person, I mean, guinea pigs, you just wouldn't think that they would be such powerful little healers, but they're just these little tiny biosinks. When we can get a kid to pick one up, I don't know what it is, because I mean, horses, it's obvious, they're big, and their electromagnetic field is big. Their biofeedback is huge. But these little guys, for kids with ADHD that can't sit still, they're so motivated. And it's the resonance piece to want that animal to want to stay with them. And these are bottom of the food chain little guys. So they are really worried about staying alive. So, a busy body is not a safe place to be. And it's so interesting to see, once that kid gets the guinea pig on their lap or on their chest, you just see all of that regulation happen from this tiny little animal. Again, and something that we didn't expect to learn along the way that we have learned. I think I'm going to skip through this part. Mia, I'll just say a little bit about Mia. She came to us from Kids Up Humane Society. She was what we labeled a land shark. She had been really hurt by people, did not trust people. You could see her front knees there's a lot of calcium deposit on her knees. She had obviously had some kind of infection at some point in her life that wasn't treated. And she was very crippled and painful and just did not like people at all. Our veterinarians thought we were making a huge mistake bringing her in. They felt like somebody was going to get hurt. And this was the horse that made us put our philosophy to test. We had to walk our talk, and we had to believe that she could heal. she wasn't going to heal from one of us being involved with her. It wasn't going to be a relationship with one of us. It had to be a relationship with one of the animals on the property. And it was Rasa. Rasa's nose is, I mean, that was Rasa's nose that was sticking out there. She and Rasa had a connection. Rasa tucked her under her wing. And Rasa's behavior got a little bit dicey for a while. And Mia would chase us off if we were doing anything to help Rasa or if we needed to move Rasa. It was a challenge, but we stuck to our guns. We believed what we believed. And in the end, this horse, after being with us for a few months, she walked out of the paddock. We would never have let her out before. She walked out and ate with me there and then turned around and went back to her paddock. And over time, she continued to heal more and more. Her trauma levels, decreased. And before she passed, kids loved her. She would welcome kids to traumatize kids to come up to her stall and pet her. She still had some funky things about her, but nothing that was unsafe. So we like to tell that story because it was a challenge for us to really put our money where our mouth is and see what would happen. And we were right. And that was a good thing. These are just more examples of very difficult rooster. He again does not like people. He is just wicked if he gets out of his cage, his run. But this kid loved him and he loved her and he never hurt her. She laid her body alongside the pen, which if anybody else, he would have been taking chunks of skin out of every place that he could get his beak between the wire. He would be doing that. And whatever it was about those two was magic and continued to be. She left, she went away, she came back years later and he's still here. And oh my God, everybody knows don't go in with Phoenix. And we're careful about how we feed him, how we take care of him. If he needs medical care, it's a big deal. We turn our back and this young lady now is in his pen with him and he is okay with it. He's not going after her. So that whatever that resonance was when she was a young girl stayed, 8 years later when she came back. Bruce Perry is another wonderful author. Has written a lot of books about parenting and kids and understanding kids and trauma. And he says the more healthy relationships a child has, the more likely he will be able to recover from the trauma and thrive. Relationships are the agents of change, and the most powerful therapy is human love. And of course, I would shift that to say that includes everybody. If we think about Mia, we think about many of the animals that have come, and the importance of our relationship with other animals. So again, I as I think about my career and the role that One Heart Wild plays in the community right now, both for helping animals and helping people, and every lesson that I've learned from every animal that's come and that continues to come, as well as the people that we work with, I have so much gratitude for being able to be where I'm at and do what I do, and to be able to share this with other people and maybe get people thinking differently. If you're already not thinking like me, maybe you'll start thinking more like me. Dr. Brene Brown, if you're not familiar with her, she's a shame. What is she? She's a shame and empathy researcher. And she says the truth is rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection. So social animals, social brains, social connection, we're more the same than different. And that's kind of the bottom line or the foundation of One Heart Wild and all that we do. So that's it for me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I do have a question.
Okay.
I want you to comment on two people who have been in the audit in the news recently. One is a governor who shot her dog, number one. And number two there is a program down near Gig Harbor at the Women's Correctional place, and they train dogs to be, I think, for the blind or for care animals.
Yeah,
What about those two incidents?
yeah. Boy, I just read something from a veterinarian the other day. He'd responded to Christy Nome shooting the dog. And he, his whole premise was there's just no reason for that. He said, if you're going to get a high energy dog, know the dog that you're going to get. And if if you are going to get a high energy breed, then you have to be prepared to deal with what that high energy breed needs. And he said, she has the means to get a trainer and to make sure that that dog is getting the stimulation and training that it needs to be a good citizen. And this dog was a puppy still, so still growing and still learning, and that human failed to provide what that dog needed. He talked about, he said, I'm not, obviously, as a veterinarian, I have ended a lot of lives, but I've ended those lives because there just wasn't any other option, whether there wasn't a medical option or a behavioral option, but never as a convenience. And he said, he is so concerned about what precedent that sets, how many people are going to be influenced by that and think, well, I'm annoyed with this dog and I'm going to just take it out behind the barn and shoot it. That's a terrible precedent for someone in the public to set for other people. I wondered, from a therapist standpoint, what happens to the kids? I read something where I must have been in her book, an excerpt from her book. The kids asked her where the dog was when they got in the car after school. And she didn't say what her answer was. But now they know. And I wonder there's such a lack of empathy. And we know empathy is so important in connection. And connection is how we are healthy in the world. So what happens to, I just think from a therapeutic standpoint, what happened in that family? What happens to the kids in the family? And then she went and got the goat and did the same thing. There's no excuse for it. I think that she could have found any number of people who would have taken that dog. I know that almost every breed has a breed rescue, and those breed rescues will take those dogs and they'll take them with all kinds of challenges, from behavioral to medical to whatever. So it just didn't need to happen. And it's a heartbreaking precedent to set. And I don't know why in the world, she would think that that was interesting to write about. So I don't know. I don't know what the long-term or short-term consequences are. I know there's been a lot of pushback, and that's great. I think the short-term term consequences for her is maybe it didn't play well, and we're having conversations that are different than maybe we would have. But yeah, there's just so many other options. I was just reading about that program in Gig Harbor today. I think there was something in the news about it. I think there's so many great things about it. So obviously the healing that can happen for those women that are incarcerated. I mean, there's no question that I don't think it's a stretch to say 100% of people who end up incarcerated have a trauma history. I don't think that that's a stretch. So, and I don't think that we are addressing the trauma piece at all by incarcerating people. I mean, that's not to say that that might be being incarcerated might be a consequence to an action, but we also need to be thinking about how do we rehabilitate people? How do we provide services that actually help people heal? And certainly providing opportunities for people who are incarcerated to work with animals is a pathway to healing. And not only that, the pet industry is massive. And so those women are also getting job skills. If they're able to leave and train, if they're able to groom, if they're able to be behaviorists, to start understanding how you help a dog with behavioral issues, they leave not only with some of the psychological benefits of that relationship building, but also skills and tools that might help them integrate back and actually make a better life for themselves outside. And I think that's rehabilitative. And I think that's wonderful. Yeah.
I recently saw a piece, a bit of a documentary about animals
Mm,
and their clicking and the communication and
Yeah.
trying to interpret the clicks. And it just makes you really, just because, and the fact that they're communicating, like you talked about the connectivity, the care, we know from all the information here about the organs
Yeah.
that Puget Sound,
Yeah.
about how much, how connected they are. But it just seems like there's just a lot of research
Yeah.
now about that kind of connectivity.
Yeah.
And it really makes you think about how callous we've been
Yeah,
toward those animals of many species.
absolutely. Yeah, I think a lot of the people that are my age that were behaviorists and doing research, and a lot of the people that were studying orcas 30 years ago, there was never a consideration about each individual as a thinking, feeling, planning, intelligent individual. It was an automaton of behaviors. And a lot of the people that I respect the most and read a lot from now are those people who left that. I mean, they risked everything to leave their careers to actually start to say, we got it wrong. They are communicating. When that orca puts her dead baby on her nose and is, spending 2 weeks keeping that dead baby on her nose, that's grief. We all know that's grief. That's not just an automatic behavior. That is a social mammal behavior that all of us social mammals can look at and relate to. So it's fascinating to read some of these some of the books that have been written from these people who have been in the field from that really hardline behaviorist perspective, who are now writing from, rethinking their entire careers and the way they saw things and maybe even some of the research they did. And they're really valuable because they've been in the field so long, and I think a lot of them had feelings about what they were seeing, but their career's over. If they, 20 years ago, if they would have been saying that, their career's over. Now, the research makes all the difference. As we're doing all this research now, these people that have spent their lives studying animals from the perspective of they're different from us, now are able to say, yeah, they're not that different from us. I recognize what I'm looking at because I feel it myself, or I can see when my dog is happy. I can see when my dog is excited or sad or not well, because I understand that as a fellow social mammal. Yeah.
When someone comes to your sanctuary for therapy, do they choose the animal, or do you observe them with all your animals before you decide, or they decide, or how does that?
Yeah. Almost always it's that resonance piece. People are drawn to certain animals. Sometimes, the only time I would pick, and this would be probably someone who's got a lot of trauma. And I know that we have Montana is one of the horses that we have. He's a big personality. He's got big behaviors, and he's rather terrifying to a lot of people who don't know him. And sometimes people who have a lot of trauma will put themselves in a situation that's exciting like that because they spend a lot of time dissociated, just kind of checked out, and being close to that big energy, they can feel that. Well, that's not probably where I want to start. So that would probably be the only time when I would say, when they're like, oh, I really want to work with Montana, I might say, let's check out Annie, and then we can come back to Montana. And we rarely need to come back to Montana, because once we get someplace else, they settle in and we can build on that. But working up to being with Montana from the perspective of more attuned connection versus let me get in that space because that big energy makes me feel alive. That's not where I want to go. But almost everybody resonates with somebody there. So we usually, people come out and do a tour first. I just recommend people come out and do a tour so they can hear the story and they can meet all the animals, make sure it feels like a good fit. And then they kind of have an idea when they come back. They're excited about somebody there. And, we just head straight for that. Yeah, I think everybody just kind of has a favorite, and that's where we start. Yeah.
How long a wait is from like the time somebody contacts you till they get a tour to make you go next?
Tours happen every week. Our wait list is really awful, and we're working on that. So we've got two additional clinicians coming in this summer, and hope to hire another one before the end of the year. And we're going to add casework as well, which will help move some of the people off the wait list. But right now, we're probably looking at a wait list time of maybe 2 months, 3 months.
That's not significantly
Yeah.
different than anything out there, better than a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I hate that. And we're also trying, starting next year, we're gonna start doing some brief intervention work, especially for students, in an effort to get more people off the wait list. Because some people, I mean, what's happened since COVID is therapy just lasts longer. And that, of course, makes the wait list last longer as well. And we don't turn anybody away. So I work really hard to find funding for people who can't afford to be there, can't afford to use their insurance, don't have insurance. But we refuse to be a community mental health kind of system. And in that system, people get seen for 30 minutes once every 6 or 8 weeks, and nobody gets better in that situation. So when we commit to a human or an animal, we commit until they're ready to go, till they're ready to fly. So with some brief intervention, I think that's a evidence-based modality, and it's a 6 to 12 week session with very specific goals. And I think that there's probably lots of people on the wait list, and certainly students that we see that would benefit from that. So
We have a viewer who's read a book called The Elephant in the Kitchen.
oh, I'm not familiar with that.
And that viewer wanted your comments about the emotions of elephants.
Oh man, well, I haven't read that book, but Gay Bradshaw wrote a book on elephants, and I mean they are no different than we are. Their relationships, I mean, maybe in some ways they're healthier than we are. Their matriarchal society, is very tight, and they live by that. It hasn't been destroyed by human intervention. I think that their grieving ceremonies, how they protect their babies. I mean, their social structure. I had the blessing to go to Africa 2 years ago, and it's hard to describe what it's like to be there and to see the diversity in life, and to know that, I mean, really to know that we're part of that whole environment. We're the same. We're not different. And elephants certainly, evolutionarily are, I mean, they're just more human-like than not. Dolphins, orcas, of course, all the primate species. Yeah, I would love to know that. So the book is called what?
Elephant in the Kitchen.
Elephant in the Kitchen.
Elephant in the Kitchen.
Okay. I will probably email you and ask you for that book name again. Yeah.
Where is One Heart Wild?
We are off of Willamette Meridian in Silverdale.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of tucked out there. We're close to town, but it feels like we're not when you're out there. It's just nice.
And Suzanne and I did a field trip there.
Yeah.
And it's, you don't have a big sign on the road.
On purpose.
On purpose.
Again, it's like we don't want animals dropped off out front, and we're a mental health, behavioral health agency. So we don't want people just driving in. There's clients all, on the grounds. And so we do try to have a little bit lower profile because of that.
Are there any more questions?
Yeah.
Do humans stay at the sanctuary? Like, can they stay overnight, or is there like a camp kind of facility or?
Not yet, but that is something that we have thought about.
My second thing is, do you know the work of Temple Grandin?
Oh, yes.
So I was wondering about that because I
Yeah.
love her work and I love
Yeah.
her books.
Yeah.
She works with
She's
farmers.
another one. I mean, boy, I mean, on so many levels. First of all, she's an autistic human who has just, she's battled every barrier. She's a woman. She's, a PhD in a very male dominated field. And she's had to struggle through all the challenges that come with being autistic. And she uses her autism to help us better understand how animals view the world. And she's been instrumental in the cattle industry, and designing a way for cattle to go through the chutes before they're butchered that isn't so stressful. So yeah, I don't know if you've seen the movie. She's got a movie out, or they made a movie about her. It's a wonderful movie. It's a really great movie for families who have kids who are on the spectrum, just to see, as hard as things are for families with kids who are autistic, they could do great things. It's just a harder path.
I had one more, but anybody else, but I wanted to ask about why I'm talking so loud. I'm talking so that the people in the Zoom group can hear us. That's fine. But, so I one time saw a gorilla in a cement thing that looked like a mountain. Of course, it wasn't a real mountain, it was cement. And with a waterfall that was, and this is in a zoo in Houston, and the gorilla had his hands over his ears. That's the last time I've ever gone to a zoo.
Yeah.
Because you could tell that the gorilla was being driven crazy in the zoo.
Yeah.
I just wanted your viewpoint of zoos.
Yeah. I think, well, I mean, again, if we go back to that ego graphic that I showed you, I think that a lot of zoos were set up more from that perspective of, we're important and we have all these animals on display for everybody to enjoy, and not ever really thinking about them as conscious, sentient animals with, social needs of their own and behavioral needs of their own. I think that's changing slowly. There certainly are zoos that are better than others. Captivity is never good for any animal, including, the horses that stay at my place. I think that we have a responsibility to do the very best that we can with what we have to provide all the things an animal needs to be happy and healthy and whole. I think that the good zoos are playing an important role in preserving species. So, I think that conservation piece, they've always said that they were all about conservation, but I don't think that that's been true. I think it is somewhat, and for some zoos now, which is, that's an important piece. And I just think we can never do enough to make it better for animals that we hold captive.
I don't really know how this is gonna come out, but I just applaud the work that you do. I was in a field of medicine that dealt with people that were often never normal. Kid with CP, a person that's an amputee, a person that had a spinal cord injury, a person that has some terrible deformity. And everywhere they go in their life, they are looked at, and they're never accepted completely. I mean, people, they grow on people, they have relationships, but an animal doesn't know. And so it's unconditional love, and I mean, it's just so important. I remember I saw this woman that had post-polio, and she was about emotional because she was like 50 years old, and she had a beautiful right arm. Everything else was bad. Her legs were little, frail, nothing, her left arm, but she had this gorgeous right arm. And I said, oh my God, your biceps, your delta is beautiful. And she said, no, tells me that my bottom is beautiful.
Yeah.
Nobody. And I saw her, I didn't see her for 5 years. I saw her, she said, and I said, oh my God. And she goes, you said that again. I can't, and it was like, but there are parts of everybody. So what you do for these kids that are in school, you know, they're autistic, they're in separate classrooms. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody tries to include them, the teachers, but every kid knows if they're in a special class.
Absolutely.
So, you know, this is, I just
Yeah.
applaud what you're doing.
Well, I think what you said, you're right on. What happens, we often have, one year, last year, year before last, Central Kids App brought out all of their behavioral classrooms. So these are kids who are in a classroom because of their behaviors, and they are locked in that classroom. Most of them have never been on a field trip. And, you know, it's kind of a joke. Let's see what happens. Let's see what happens if we take them to One Heart Wild. And we're like, yeah, bring it. Because we always get, whether it's a parent telling us or a teacher or another counselor or whatever, we're often the last hope. People will call us, kids, families, we've tried everything else. We think we need to give this a try. And here's all the bad things that are going to happen that you're going to have to deal with. And we don't see it. We don't see it because we're in nature, we're around animals, we're going for a walk, we're having conversations that aren't like really focused right on you and in an enclosed space where a person can't get up and move around. And the animals don't see economic status. They don't see, they don't have a judgment about what's good or bad or pretty or not, or they don't judge weight or anything. You're just another being in my space. And so we talk a lot about belonging and that as a team, as a clinical team, just how important it is for everybody who comes out to feel like this is their place and you belong here and you're safe here. And the environment makes that possible. So you're right on. I think that's part of the efficacy of that work is that they're just, and then the therapist can take a side. We're not the focus. The focus is what's happening between that person and the animal that they're interested in. And I just get to observe what's happening with the client and watching body language and asking curious questions about what they're noticing and just developing rapport from a very different perspective than if it's just me and the client having this conversation. It's a whole different dynamic. So yeah, you're right on.
That was so wonderful. I think we could continue this for.
Yeah.
So perhaps you could ask more questions individually if you want to at this time, but otherwise we're going to call it the end.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you.